What is good, everybody? Welcome, one and all, to TGI Football on the SB Nation NFL show, sponsored by DraftKings, presented as well. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. As noted, this is TGI Football on the SB Nation NFL show. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. Search for the SB Nation NFL show. Subscribe. Obviously, leave a rating, write a review. If not, well, we'll be pretty sad and devastated, to be quite honest with you. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, where you can watch us streaming live. Just search for the SB Nation NFL show. Like us on Facebook. If you aren't liking us or following us or subscribing to us on, at least one platform by now, our feelings are kind of hurt, to be quite honest with you. There is no Brandon Lee Gowton here. My name is RJ Ochoa from Blog on the Boys. I am joined by the dashing and debonair, surely geared up for Oscars weekend from Arrowhead Pride. It is Stephen Serda. Stephen, what's on the menu for you this weekend with the Oscars? Is it a big deal for you as a cinephile, or are you too pretentious for the Oscars?
It's not a big deal at all for me. It is funny that you say that because I had totally forgotten about it. I'll pay attention to it and acknowledge the things that I care about, but I don't really care for award shows. It's just not something I know people get really into seeing the celebrities sit there and their reactions and all of that stuff. It's just not I'd rather read a book or something than watch an award show.
Wow, that's kind of pretentious a little bit. I mean,
so that's fine. That's fine. I'm perfectly fine with that.
I don't really care about the validity or whatever involved with the Oscars, but I've told this story many times in different places. So I love Twitter. I think we all do. That's kind of why we're all here on some level. And Twitter is at its best in tentpole events. And we obviously experience that all the time as it relates to football or sports or whatever. But the Oscars provides one of those things that everybody is watching and everybody is communicating about on Twitter. And the story I tell all the time is the night that La La Land improperly was given the Oscar over Moonlight. That was an amazing night to be on the internet and to be just kind of every step of the way. That story got so much more interesting, and seeing all the reactions to it was incredible.
Which La La Land should have gotten it over Moonlight.
Moonlight. I don't think I saw. Was that the same year as Hidden Figures? I think it was.
I don't know. I'm not sure what that is, but
La La Land was okay. I mean, you acting like it was life changing is a little much for me.
I think it's an incredible movie. I love Damien Chazelle.
Actually, while we're on this subject, I was talking about this earlier on Friday. So you've said before that you don't IMDb things. Where does Rotten Tomatoes fall on Steven's meter of analysis or evaluation?
I mean, I kind of look at both. I use IMDb, but it's mostly to look up facts and who wrote this, who directed this. I don't really pay attention to the ratings.
Does the tomato meter matter to you at all?
No, I'll still go see things even if it's getting crushed, but it just depends on how interested I am in that particular thing.
Well, I saw Rotten Tomatoes ranked the top 10 pictures or the 10 pictures up for best film. Have you seen this? Maybe you haven't. It upset you.
No, I haven't.
I can pull it up if you'd like. Actually, well, what do you think they had number one?
Of the things that have been nominated?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. What's the best picture nominee? I don't know. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, so these are the Oscar nominees ranked by their tomato meter rating, and we're gonna get to football right now, I promise. I would have assumed in my primitive Nadia cinephile, just somebody who enjoys movies brain, that Oppenheimer would have been number one. What do you think it is? It's not number one. That's a clue.
I would say it's probably something like Anatomy of a Fall or something like that. Something that's not as publicly viewed.
Number one is The Holdovers. I'm just going to rip through the top 10 for you.
That's crazy.
2 is Past Lives. 3 is Anatomy of a Fall. 4, American Fiction. 5, finally Oppenheimer. 6, Killers of the Flower Moon. 7, The Zone of Interest. 8, Poor Things. 9, Barbie. And 10, Maestro. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The Holdovers being number one is crazy because that is a good movie and I really enjoyed it. But it's one of those things that people are like, this is the greatest thing ever. This should be nominated for 1 million Oscars. And it's it's not really it's a totally good, it's got an emotional impact. And it's a totally this is what a lonely person goes through at Christmas time. And it's a good movie, but it's nothing compared to the level and the difficulty that it was to like put together Oppenheimer. But that totally makes sense to me because that's just how like critics review things.
What a rational perspective on the subject. So good for you. It is Friday, March the 8th, 2024. It's the final Friday before excuse me, the legal tampering window opens on Monday. We will be recording Monday Football Monday, but under the same premise that we're doing this, which is telling you what time it is because things can and will change. It's 11:38 Central, 8 in the morning. If it were PM, Steve and I don't know what would have happened in our lives to have led to us doing this at midnight on a Friday. But so it's just before noon. So if something happens after that, apologies, but we're going to go off of what we know now. Some free agency things have started to happen, but obviously nothing can really heat up until the legal tampering window opens. And then obviously nothing can happen until the new league year begins on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. That being said, Stephen, the kind of hot thing at the moment is Russell Wilson. He was not released in a formal sense, but in a metaphorical sense, which is really where Russell Wilson lives all the time, and was allowed to negotiate with teams, obviously in anticipation of all this becoming formalized and legitimized next week. That process has begun. It was reported on Friday morning that Russell was in the Newark airport on his way to Pittsburgh to visit with the Steelers. And then as everybody was reacting to that, it was reported that while he was in transit, I suppose, he met briefly with the New York Giants. So we know of two teams now that have scheduled or have already met with Russell for meetings. The Raiders have been connected to him as another potential option. You had a different take on this than everybody else who was just kind of assessing it from the Russell joining the team's perspective.
Yeah, I think that signing Russell Wilson, and we talked about him a couple of weeks ago, I think on this very podcast, I think specifically for those teams, it is just such a loser thing to do. And it's just so there's no energy behind it. There's no enthusiasm behind it. Like it's the Giants admitting we screwed up giving Daniel Jones this big contract, and now he's coming off of a serious injury, and we don't really have any other options because we're stuck with Daniel Jones. So maybe because Russell Wilson's making a bunch of money from the Denver Broncos this season, we can get him on a veteran minimum deal and maybe have this like quarterback competition if Daniel Jones is even healthy at training camp time. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I've already talked about them. If I'm a Steelers fan, I am really upset about this because I think the Steelers have a good team and they have some talented players and they've got some pieces there, but they are totally locked into, hey, Mike Tomlin's going to keep us competitive every year. We're going to float around 500, maybe make the postseason, get destroyed by a team that's actually good. And that's just who we are now. And we're not going to make any moves. We're not going to do anything drastic to actually dramatically improve our situation. And maybe Kenny Pickett will develop more or something. Like, we've got a large enough sample size of Kenny Pickett. I know he's only headed into year 3, but Kenny Pickett is not a good NFL quarterback. Like,
well, then why are you mad that they're pursuing Russell?
Because this doesn't do anything. Like, this doesn't change the situation. Like, have we watched Russell Wilson? I've watched him a lot because he played for the Denver Broncos. Russell Wilson, like, I know he beat the Chiefs last year, but that was another situation where it was more of like the Chiefs just shooting themselves in the foot. Like, Russell Wilson had like 100 passing yards in that game. Like, he wasn't good. And every time I've seen him over the last couple of years with the Broncos, and I watched his first season with the Broncos, they were just slapped into prime time over and over again because they were like, oh, the Broncos are going to be good. And then they were awful. And he's just not good anymore. Like, he can be a serviceable veteran stopgap quarterback, I think, for a team like the Giants, which is the Giants, no matter what, like Daniel Jones, Russell Wilson, they're far away from competing in anything. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are a lot closer than the Giants are right now. So if you're the Steelers and you're just saying this is our best option, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, or Russell Wilson, well, fans should not be excited about that because you're going into next season saying we're just going to do the exact same thing that we've been doing for the last several years.
Okay, so obviously we're focused on the Steelers portion of this for a moment, but I have a lot that I'm curious about as far as your opinions here. So the Steelers hold the 20th overall pick in the draft. So they're way out of the zone of availability for any would-be. They're not like, even if you don't believe JJ McCarthy's going 4 overall, like we kind of talked about a little bit, on the NFL show this past week, like he's going before the 20th overall pick if he doesn't go 4. If Arizona takes Marvin Harrison Jr. and JJ goes somewhere else, whatever. So you're well out of like striking distance as far as getting somebody that can help you there. You're getting like this year's Kenny Pickett in some respects. And from a free agency standpoint, so by most people's opinion, Kirk Cousins is the best free agent quarterback available. They're probably not in the running for him. Do you know the other free agent quarterbacks? So these are like the other practical options for them to pursue besides Russell. Do you know who they are? Because it's a pretty devastating list.
I mean, Baker hasn't signed.
Well, even then, but Baker's kind of got one foot in Tampa already, like back in Tampa. Other than that, you're talking about Jacoby Brissett, Ryan Tannehill. I know BLG threw that idea out. Jameis, Gardner Minshew, Tyrod Taylor. I mean, it gets pretty thin. I mean, so this is you're taking a chance on, obviously, I wouldn't say hitting the lottery, but this working out, and it won't cost you anything. And like we've covered that element of this a lot. Do you know how many touchdown passes Kenny Pickett threw last year? I was looking at this. This is really, really, really sad.
I'd say like 14, maybe.
Dude, Steven, he hasn't thrown 14 in his career. He threw he threw 6 touchdown passes last year and 7 the year before his rookie season. So he's thrown 13 total. Russ in his first season in Denver, the like super awful like season from hell, threw 16 touchdown passes. Not to lean on just that, but I mean, for the vet minimum, again, because of the uniqueness of the situation, like I think this is actually legit. And honestly, you said if you were a Steelers fan, you'd be pissed. The little that I've kind of, perused, certainly from our friends from behind the steel curtain, they're kind of pumped. Like Steelers fans really hate Kenny Pickett. I don't know. There's a lot of these when it comes to the Cowboys, but like, what's the university that if somebody went to, Chiefs fans are like, they have blinders on for them? Like, is it like Mizzou maybe, or like Kansas State maybe? So I'm trying to think of the closest thing that turns out NFL talent.
Probably Mizzou, because I feel like they put more guys into the league, like difference makers.
Right.
Than
so like if Drew Lock had been a Chief, like there might have been like a higher sense of loyalty to him than anywhere else. So like for the Cowboys, if a player went to like the University of Texas or Texas A&M or Texas Tech or like I said, there's a lot that kind of plays. But so for Kenny Pickett, if you're a Steelers fan, he went to Pitt. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a little bit of like homerism that is like benefiting him. So I think a lot of Steelers fans are kind of fed up, to your point. With Kenny Pickett, and Russ represents an option, like literally an alternative. And at this point, it's almost like anything else is preferable to Kenny Pickett. So I think this is the best fit for Russell, honestly, because Mike Tomlin's also the dude who's going to put up with the least amount of his crap.
Yeah, it's not a bad fit. Like I totally agree with you on that. And it's like when we talked about this a few weeks ago, like I said, the Falcons, could be somebody that would be interested in Russell Wilson or something like that. Like, yeah, I think of the available options, like he is a serviceable player that you could go out and get. I just think that Pittsburgh has talent and Mike Tomlin's a good coach. And like, I think that they could be better than they are right now if they would just make a move for a Justin Fields or something like that, which is going to cost you a second or a third round pick. Probably. I'd rather do that than sign Russell Wilson and just be in the same spot.
If I'm Pittsburgh specifically, and maybe this is just like hoping myself into this as we're kind of having the conversation. If you trade, we've talked about this a little bit, but if you trade for Justin Fields, you have to instantly pick up his 5th-year option, right? Like, because you're not trading for him to not have him around next year. Like, I don't know that I want that. Like, I kind of like the idea of having Russ around on a 1-year deal and figuring this out, like, as a bridge to the future, like kind of a glorified Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, but like, again, like, do we think the Steelers are going to be bad enough next season that they're going to have a high-end pick and fix their quarterback situation? Like, I feel like they're just going to be in the exact same boat next season because they're going to hover around 500 all year. They're going to wind up having like a late teens first-round pick, and they're not going to be in contention for a quarterback or someone who can actually like change the trajectory of their franchise.
Who's more likely to lead the Steelers to the Super Bowl? I mean, it's a ridiculous question, but Russell Wilson or Justin Fields? I think it's Russell Wilson.
I think it's Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields with a better situation around him can actually win football games when it's not.
What if Justin Fields shows up and is like, y'all were right, Chase Claypool sucks? Like, you know what I mean? Like, but I think the difference is negligible enough to where it's not worth the draft picks that would seemingly be required to bring Fields in, and the sizable commitment for next year. Yeah.
I think it's it's a fine move if they're actually taking steps towards like there's a plan long term for what we're doing right now. This isn't just a next season. We got TJ Watt in his prime, and this defense can still win us games like they did multiple times last year. And we've got Deontay Johnson and George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth and like a decent running game. Like we've got some weapons in place where we could be competitive if we just got like slightly better quarterback play. But you still need to see something from them that suggests that there's something past next season and just signing a Russell Wilson. And I just don't feel like they've done any of that recently outside of Kenny Pickett, which like Kenny Pickett, yeah, it's young and he's gotten some opportunities. And last year he got injured and whatever. But like it's mind-blowing that he hasn't thrown for 14 combined touchdown passes through 2 seasons as a starter. Like that's insane. That's unbelievable. Like what other quarterback in the league would you even look at and say like, yeah, they should run it back? Like Mitch Trubisky was better than that his first couple of years in the NFL.
The departing Mitch Trubisky, who's back in Buffalo, by the way, by way of action this past week. Okay, flip your perspective here. You're Russell now, so like really sorry about this, but why would you prefer the Giants over the Steelers outside of maybe brand potential? Obviously, Russ is not your normal free agent quarterback. His wife is also extraordinarily famous. I'm sure, being a Giant would be more conducive towards off the field endeavors or whatever. But if you're Russ, I think the path to starting, which is obviously what he's looking to achieve, is much shorter in Pittsburgh because of what you just said with Kenny Pickett. I mean, there might be some difference to, Daniel Jones, which is worth not going there in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the situation's better in New York at all. But yeah, I think it just kind of depends on Daniel Jones. Like if he's not going to be ready to start next season and then Russell Wilson starts and he looks functional and like they're actually like, being competitive and maybe winning a few football games, like then maybe it's a question of like, whether do we go back to Daniel Jones or do we just stick and ride this out with Russell Wilson? It's just they kind of handcuff themselves by giving Daniel Jones a bunch of money. And so like he's going to be on the roster next season because nobody's going to trade for him. And you don't even know if he's going to be ready for week 1. So then it's like that then comes up the question. It's like, okay, well, what do? We got this guy who's making $30-40 million or whatever, just sitting on the bench for Russell Wilson. Like, I think Brian Daboll, like that's like lame duck head coach written all over it.
See, like as I asked the question, I kind of think the Giants might be better because Russ is in a position where he needs a lot of team success, right? Like he doesn't even really need like an individually successful season. And it might actually be difficult for him to achieve that. So going to the Steelers is almost like a death sentence as far as like are the Steelers winning the AFC North? No. You know what I mean? Like, do you really think that? And even then, the path to being a wild card team in the AFC is so much more difficult. And some of that is because of the logjam. And like you're literally going to a division with maybe 3 other playoff teams. Obviously, we all have questions about the Browns and their quarterback situation. Versus, like, think about if he goes to the Giants. Like, do you not agree that a year from now, Mike McCarthy and Nick Sirianni could both be gone? Like the Cowboys and Eagles could both be starting over next year, potentially. I mean, especially if the Cowboys don't get the Dak Prescott extension done. Like if you're Russ and you go to the Giants, and there's something to being the dude who like delivers for a franchise in a very, very long time. The Giants haven't won the division since 2011. So like if you go and you catch the Cowboys and the Eagles in lame duck years themselves and just beat out the sorry Commanders and Drake May or whatever it winds up being, you win the NFC East. I mean, I think that story works better for the like rehabilitation of his career arc.
Yeah, but then it's like, but if let's say we're talking 2 years down the road now, and maybe there is a path to success there for him, but then like if they're bad again next season, is Brian Daboll going to get fired and they're going to have a whole coaching overhaul? Like, are they going to go through all of that again? Because the Giants do that every few years now. And like, they've got a top 6 pick in this draft, so they could add a star wide receiver like Rome Dunes or Malik Neighbors or something like that, like depending on who's available. But they just have needs everywhere. Like Saquon's going to hit free agency. Their offensive line's still terrible. Their defense had some moments last season, but their defense isn't particularly talented. Like, I just don't think I don't think there's a path to long-term success, whereas in Pittsburgh, there's more of a path to short-term success for a player like Russell Wilson, even though I don't agree with him going there.
I don't know. It's a tough scene, but I do think will probably be one of these two teams if you're Russ over the Raiders. There's just so many, and the Raiders thing is a cool story if you go and it works, right? Like if you go and you embarrass the Broncos and it's like hilarious, like, oh, what a bunch of idiots, they let you go. But what if you go and you suck? You know what I mean? What if you go and you just like prove them right? That would really, really, really suck. And I would not want to bet on, if the question is like, who would you rather bet on, Antonio Pierce, even Brian Dable, or Mike Tomlin? That's why like Pittsburgh is kind of the most logical choice in some senses.
I do. Devontae Adams getting upset with Russell Wilson would be highly entertaining.
I saw a tweet. I don't want to take credit for this. On the subject of highly entertaining things, it was from Chris Brockman, one of the producer for Rich Eisen's show, and he said that the amount of content we would get if Russell went to Pittsburgh and the Steelers were finally below 500, that it would just be spectacular. Like that would be. I think we deserve that. Like after putting up with all this for a long time, it would be really, really, really fun.
And yeah, they're finally just bottom out, and they've got like a top 3 draft pick or something like that with Russell Wilson. That would be fantastic. Okay, I'm on board with it if that's what it takes to get the Steelers a top 5 draft pick.
So Jalen Johnson got a brand new deal from the Chicago Bears, one franchise tag taken care of. That was kind of a weird, I wouldn't say dramatic story, but you and I are both like, we're safe to have this conversation with BLG not around. Like we're both kind of in on the Bears, and I think he's in on them in a Justin Fields-less world. They're starting to act like a team that knows, like, or at least behave in terms of what we can discern through their actions, like a team that's going to have a quarterback on a rookie contract. So if you somehow don't believe they're taking Caleb Williams, Steven has some beachfront property in Kansas City to tell to you. But that being said, this is kind of like the Bears are set up in a very, I don't want to like put the cart before the horse here, but like the Bears could totally be an NFC playoff team next year if Caleb Williams is as advertised, obviously.
Yeah, I still have questions about Ryan Poles and the decisions that he's made. Like I just think, yes, they are in a position, like Montez Sweat was a huge home run trade for them, even though I still think that like giving up a high end draft pick just to give a guy a massive contract is not the best business practice when you're supposed to be.
But they have the guy, like that's what matters the most. They have the player now.
And then re-signing Jalen Johnson, I think, is huge, because Jalen Johnson, when he was healthy last season, was amazing. Like there's no doubt about that. He deserved that contract, and somebody would have made him the highest paid cornerback in football because he was that good last season. Like, yeah, they're finally moving in the right direction, but part of my questioning of just their front office and Ryan Poles too is like, I know Caleb Williams is the guy that they should absolutely take number 1 overall. And I think that gives you more flexibility moving forward. But I also feel like they just totally wasted this window with Justin Fields. And their logic was like, well, we're rebuilding, we got to make a bunch of moves. Like they went through 2 straight years of totally just punting cap space and not even trying to build around him, and saying, well, it's all for the future. It's all for the future. It's all for the future. And we're several years into this thing now, and you have the number 1 pick and you have another top 10 pick. And yeah, that came out of a savvy trade to the Carolina Panthers or whatever. But I just don't think that they've made the best decisions. I don't think that they gave Justin Fields a real chance to succeed. And now I have questions about Matt Eberflus and like whether or not this is going to be another season where, like, if they underperform, he's going to be gone. Then you're going through a coaching change with the young quarterback again, and we're starting this whole thing all over. So I think the Bears are obviously going to be better. What their defense showed last season after being awful for the first like month and then really turning things around is something you can absolutely build on. And I do think that they can be a much more competitive team, but it's still going to be a rookie quarterback in all likelihood with Caleb Williams, and there's going to be some growing pains and all of that stuff. So I think the Bears are moving in the right direction, but I don't know if I feel like they're like a playoff team.
This has been brought up many times, but the Bears finished 11th in weighted DVOA, which places an emphasis on the most recent games, obviously, which is representative of the fact that they finished strong. It wasn't just like a fluke or anything like that. I'm kind of worried for my guy Matt Eberflus. I've been a big fan of his since he was the Cowboys linebackers coach. Did you see, by the way, the photo of him and Matt LaFleur this week that was popping around?
No.
I don't know what game they were at. They were at a basketball game, and they were so it had to have been somewhere like in the Chicago, Milwaukee area, obviously. I don't know if it was like a Bucks game or a Bulls game or I don't know, maybe even a collegiate game, but they were sitting next to each other courtside, and Matt Eberflus had like a vodka soda or something. Maybe it might have been water, but there was a lime in there, which makes me think it was a cocktail. And Matt LaFleur had it was like one of those like square thin boxes of popcorn, and they were just taking in the basketball game together. And there were some takes that were like, "Oh, this is so lame that rival head coaches are enjoying a basketball game together." So that happened.
That's stupid. Lots of NFL head coaches are friends. They've all worked together at some point, probably.
And they're both named Matt. So a big Madison's happening. Okay. Well, I think the Bears are going to be good. You don't. That's fine. Kirk Cousins has obviously kind of been the heaviest topic around the NFL, and I think that he is obviously the most seismic domino that has yet to fall. Where are you at right now? What do you believe? He's going back, and this Falcon stuff is just posturing and negotiating, or do you think he's really going to Atlanta?
I still think it makes the most sense for him to stay in Minnesota. I think what it's going to come down to is how much Minnesota is willing to pay him. I think the Falcons will absolutely make him like the highest paid quarterback in football, probably. And I think he's been that good. I would like to see the Kirk Cousins, like the way he was playing last season before the injury. It was like some of the best football of his career. I would really like to see another full season of that with Kevin O'Connell and that staff, because I do think they have a good coaching staff in place. And what he can do with healthy Justin Jefferson, who got hurt super early in the season, and Jordan Addison. I know it's probably going to be a while before TJ Hawkinson's back and fully healthy, but like their defense could take another step next season. So I like where the Vikings are at if they can bring Kirk Cousins back. And then I think it's a total catastrophe, like if he leaves, because then there's the Justin Jefferson stuff. And he's like, I want to wait and see what's happening with the quarterback situation before I re-up my contract, because he's going to be the highest paid wide receiver in football, whether it's from the Vikings or somebody else. And I think some of this stuff, guys just throw that out there and then typically wind up signing the huge contracts because they don't want to deal with moving and changing teams and all of that. But I think the best move is for the Vikings to try to bring back Kirk Cousins. And I would have to imagine that his family would be interested in doing that over moving and doing all that stuff and moving the Falcons. But the Falcons are a good situation right now, and they're an improving situation with the new head coach and all the pieces that they have there.
So you're leaning Vikings. You're leaning.
Yeah, I think he stays in Minnesota still.
I think he leaves. I'm it's like 51-49 for me, but I'm leaning that way. So presuming he leaves, like follow this flow chart. Yes or no? Justin Jefferson's new contract or extension is with the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes.
So you're saying he's staying regardless?
Yeah, I think it's really rare that a player like that would wind up leaving because of the quarterback situation. Like, I feel like Minnesota will just come in and be like, listen, we're not letting you walk. I guess they could try to trade him or something, but I feel like they'll just come in and make him the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history, and he'll wind up staying in Minnesota.
So I think a fun hypothetical to consider, because this is the last week of hypotheticals, because we'll have some more answers next week, is Kirk goes to Atlanta. Justin Jefferson says, y'all can pop rocks. I want nothing to do with this place. By the way, actually, a quick tangent. Did you see that? I'm rooting for this at this point, by the way, for obvious reasons, that Minnesota reportedly has interest in Trey Lance if Kirk Cousins leaves. Have you seen this?
No.
Well, he's from Minnesota, and obviously North Dakota State's nearby. I recall they had some interest in him when he was still in San Francisco. So if Dallas is able to, get something back for him, that would be awesome. But he's a 2021 draftee. So like Justin Fields, they would have to decide if they want to pick up his 5th-year option now, or which would be crazy. It's kind of crazy for Justin Fields, and we've seen him play a lot of football. Like, it would be really crazy for Trey Lance when we haven't seen him at all. So yeah, imagine you're Justin Jefferson. They're like, dude, don't worry, we have Trey Lance. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be kind of. So
I would not pick up that 5th-year option.
I think it would be worth not picking it up, and then if you have to, like, franchise tag. Like, if like, you know what I mean? Like, if you hit the lotto and it works out greatly, you just place the franchise tag on him and you figure it out. But yeah. But that being said, living in a fun hypothetical, Kirk goes to Atlanta again. Hypothetically, Justin Jefferson says, I don't want to be here anymore without Kirk. Who's the team that we think can give Minnesota, again in this super fun hypothetical, enough ammunition to where the Vikings can get one of these quarterbacks. Like maybe the Vikings are the team lurking for Jaden Daniels or something like that, and we're not properly considering that because they don't have that ammunition yet. Like the team that would acquire Justin Jefferson, like maybe it's the Chargers. You know what I mean? At like, and part of what's involved is the 5th overall pick, and then Minnesota is able to package that with something else to move up even further.
Yeah, I mean that would be really interesting. I mean the Giants with the 6th overall pick, I think would be really interesting. If I were the Chiefs and Justin Jefferson was available, I would call up and be like 2 first-round picks, easy right now.
The Chiefs' first-round picks are so meaningless, though. Nope, they hold no water.
Everybody talking about Chiefs trades right now, and it's like nobody wants to trade with them because if you're the rest of the NFL, you're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs and being like, well, it's going to be 32. Like until it's not 32, you're just assuming it's 32. And so, yeah, I don't think that they would have the ammunition, but I think one of those teams would be really interesting, or somebody else who just can give up a lot of draft picks. Because I would imagine Justin Jefferson, like I know Tyreek Hill didn't go for like multiple first-round picks or something like that, and teams have been a lot better about that recently, aside from the Rams. So I would imagine like 2 first-round picks for Justin Jefferson would probably be a lot, but I would do that in a heartbeat if I was a contending team.
Okay, so new subject here. Which running back, I just want to name first, will garner or will make the most money per year of the class? We've got Saquon, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry. Who's getting the most per year? Prediction.
I mean, it should be Saquon out of that group. I think
not Derrick Henry.
No, Derrick Henry was still fine last year, and I think Derrick Henry is still like a totally serviceable running back, but he's getting older, and I think in the right system, like
is Saquon not getting older? Is Saquon getting younger?
He is, but he's.
I hate that expression, by the way. Like people say that as if there are people who are getting younger. Literally every human is getting older.
But Saquon's a younger player, and I still am a believer in Saquon's ability. Where I think like literally the first half of his career was totally wasted in New York, and he's never really been in a good situation. So I'm like, if he gets a good play caller and gets into a better situation where he can actually just be like a complimentary player and go out and make plays, like I still feel like Saquon's got the highest upside of anybody. And like Josh Jacobs, I know has been really good and has proven like he can be a workhorse, but at this point, I would rather take Saquon and his upside over even Josh Jacobs.
See, like I don't know why we think Saquon is going to be. I'm not saying you're even saying he's going to be amazing, but I don't know how that happened. I mean, I do feel like we might be overlooking just a little bit. So looking at their standing, man. Derrick Henry's played a lot of football. He's played 119 games. Saquon has played 74 games though. Like he's not, incredibly young.
Yeah.
I mean, he was only drafted 2 years after Derrick Henry. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not like he's fresh. I mean, just because he's been on a team that's been awful doesn't mean. But so you think, fine, I'll walk with you though that Saquon is the one. Does he hit $10 million per year?
Yeah, I think so. I think he can get that. I know running backs are undervalued now and they don't get paid. Like, but I feel like 10 million. Like, I feel like you could easily get to 10 million for a player like Saquon or
something. He hit 11.
Like, what did Miles Sanders make from the Panthers last year? Like,
Miles Sanders is at 6.3, 6.4 if you're rounding up.
And Miles Sanders has one highly productive season, and he was coming off of that last year, and everybody was like, "Oh, we're not going near that," except for the Panthers. But Saquon's a more talented player than that. If I was in the running back market, I'd much rather target Tony Pollard at like a discount.
Did you bring up Miles Sanders because he was Saquon's backup at Penn State? Did you know that?
I did know that, but that's not why I brought it up. It's just wanted to kind of take a shot at Miles Sanders, I guess.
I think he hits maybe like 11 per year, but it's with a team that has a quarterback on a rookie contract. Like it's the Texans, and it's like an obvious overpay because of the situation that team is in.
Yeah, and I think that makes the most sense. Like, don't you want to see Saquon Barkley with the Texans? I know
I'd rather Derrick Henry with the Texans.
Derrick Henry, yeah. See, I'd rather they bring in like do it all running back because Derrick Henry's still not going to be on the field on passing downs. Like he was just never that guy.
Okay, so I'm very confident in CJ Stroud. Like, I don't think he needs. You know who else will be on the field for passing downs? Tank Dell and Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz, who got paid too. Like, they'll be fine. So, you know.
But like, so for Tony Pollard, like we talked about him a little bit. Like, I think Tony Pollard's going to be the guy where it's like, if he comes in and workouts and like coming off that injury that he suffered going into last year, and you know, his production was down as the workhorse running back. I think a lot of teams right now that don't use workhorse running backs anyways, that use multiple guys, are going to look at him like, oh, he's still got juice. We can still get a lot out of him if he stays healthy.
I agree with you. So I've brought this up before, but I think it bears repeating. When I spoke to Tony Pollard at the Super Bowl, and he gave me, did you know he gave me a pillow? I don't know if you produced that audio.
No, I did not know that.
He gave me a pillow, a Sleep Number pillow. It was pretty sick.
Nice.
So yeah, but I asked him. So it's funny. I used it because I wanted to be able to say like I'm using the Tony Pollard pillow, but I was anticipating it not being comfortable, and then I was going to be devastated because I wasn't going to be able to say that on a regular basis. But it's, to my delight, very comfortable. So like I can say that my pillow was a gift from Tony Pollard. But so I asked him like when he finally felt like himself last year, because he was coming off the fractured fibula, and he said he didn't say week 11, but he said the Carolina Panthers game, that was week 11. From week 11 through the wild card round, PFF's highest graded rusher, Tony Pollard.
Yeah.
I mean,
I feel like he could be the value guy of
this. He's the best buy low guy. I'm completely with you. But I would love to see Derrick Henry. So also on that note, to make everything about the Cowboys, which to be fair is my job, and like literally, he bought a house this week in Dallas. So ooh, you never know. Ooh, I'm kind of hoping for that. You know, for obvious, it'd be great content at the very least. But yeah, I think, do 2 running backs hit $10 million per year?
No, I don't think so.
I think I'm with you.
It's because a lot's been made about like raising the cap and like all these monster deals are going to happen. And I just think we overestimate a lot. And then occasionally we get those balloon years where they do like far surpass what everybody is projecting. But I feel like we've seen it kind of settle down in the last couple of years, where like the Mike Evans deal, to go back to Tampa, like wasn't even really as much money as it initially looked like it was.
Last kind of thing. And as the Cowboys person, I'm really surprised that this didn't get any legs. I really thought like Super Bowl week we were going to hear a lot about this. Have you seen that Josh Allen is in France right now? Do you see any of this chatter? So I don't know what's going on there, but I hope it's enjoyable for him. The Bills cut like everybody this past week in an effort to reconcile their salary cap situation, and tough scene. It had to be super awkward for Von Miller to just watch like everybody pay the price literally for his contract. Like everybody's getting cut because he's on the books. Just super. You rolled your eyes. You're upset about this, or?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm upset about it, but it's, I think that front office releasing like these cornerstone players who have been around for years, been through all the ups and downs, just to rework Von Miller's contract after all of the issues he had last season. And even when he was healthy, he didn't look like he was nearly the same player coming off of that knee injury. And they rework his deal to bring him back, but cut all of these other guys who have been instrumental in what they've built in Buffalo. If I was still on that team, I would be like, yeah, I don't really love that. Like, I'm not really a fan of the way we're doing things right now.
I mean, they're kind of stuck though. Like, I don't think they're doing it because they like Vaughn, or I'm not saying that they hate him, but I mean, his cap number, the dead money to cut him this year would be $30.3 million. They're just stuck. I mean, that's, the contract didn't age well, and he hasn't, it didn't age well because he hasn't been the player that they hoped he would be. And they took a swing and they missed, and that's the perils of free agency.
And 2 years ago, if Von Miller doesn't suffer that knee injury, like the way the Bills defense was playing before he went down, because that was still looked like, okay, Von Miller is one of the premium pass rushers in the NFL. Like, I think that team was the team that had a chance to win a Super Bowl, and they pushed all in that season. Then Von Miller went down, and they didn't have anybody else who could wreck games like that. And it wound up costing them in the playoffs. but it was a gamble that they took. Like we see teams do this all the time, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. The Bills were always going to come to an offseason like this where they had to cut ties with a bunch of people because they had so many aging veterans on their roster. And that's also says about like their drafts haven't been particularly great in recent years either. Like a lot's been made about they wanted Trent McDuffie and the Chiefs traded up and sniped him. They took Kaiir Elam, who's been healthy and active for a lot of his NFL career.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints are looking at this like, oh, you never have to pay the price for this. What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean you're going to just release people? Like, no, you could just restructure them for the 400th year in a row. So while the Vaughn thing is interesting, I suppose, the thing that I was kind of talking about that I'm surprised didn't have more traction was Stephon Diggs. I really thought that we were going to get a Stephon Diggs campaign wanting out of Buffalo. And I feel like there's been no chatter about this. Like, especially for, or given the context of the season that we had, right? Like where there was all this, like, and I know that the Bills turned it around and like that kind of settled a lot of these things, but like midway through the season, wouldn't you have guaranteed that there was no way Stephon was going to be playing for the Bills in 2025? And so here we sit, and he did get an extension or redid his deal with them just 2 years ago. So it's kind of a tough situation to imagine them being gone. He has a $31.1 million dead money charge if the Bills were to move on and trade him. But I mean, could you not see like on Monday at 10 a.m., when the legal tampering window opens, like getting an alert from Adam Schefter that's like, star wide receiver Stephon Diggs has told Sean McDermott that he does not plan to play for the Buffalo Bills this year. Like, like we're due one of these things. And like, I feel like this is the one that's kind of hiding in plain sight.
It feels like the Bills aren't ready to admit like we've got to totally rebuild this. And so they're like, let's cut the old players. And like Tre'Davious White is unfortunately like at his peak was one of the best cornerbacks in football, but now he's had back-to-back significant injuries that are going to keep him off the field. And so, and Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde have both been incredible in Buffalo, but they're old, like they're old players. And eventually you have to get young and you have to commit to that through the draft or through cost-effective free agents. And they were just going all in. And that's kind of what the Diggs move was about. If I were the Bills, I would look at moving him, but I think that then that's them committing to, we're not atop the AFC right now. We're not one of the teams that is legitimately the class of the AFC. And it's saying like, can we keep this thing afloat because we have Josh Allen while we have to go through some growing pains that we saw the Chiefs go through a couple of years ago. And then the Chiefs still won a Super Bowl anyways because of it. But I think most teams are afraid to do that, especially when they're legitimate contenders like the Bills are right now. But they have to commit to it. Like they have to, you have to build this thing back up through the draft because that's really the only way to do it when you've got Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs making more money than everybody else on the roster.
If he were to be moved, what situation makes the most sense? I have one I'd really like to see, and then I have one that I think makes a lot of sense. That would be weird, but makes a lot of sense. I can go first if you want, if you're kind of stuck.
Sure.
If the Cowboys didn't have Brandon Cooks on their team, because like the thing is like Stephon and Trayvon like really want to play together, right? So like it would have made sense. I just don't think it works for, especially when you consider the timeline that Dallas is on. Houston. That would be super fun, right? Like that would be a ton of fun. And as much as I love Tank Dell and Nico Collins, they're not Stephon Diggs. And so like, and I think Stephon Diggs is like more set up to be Stephon Diggs if he has help around him, which he doesn't necessarily have at Buffalo right now. So that would be a lot of fun. Do you agree with this?
Yes. I just think too at this stage of his career, I feel like his cap number is going to be tough for teams to swallow because this is the second consecutive year where his production has dramatically declined down the back half of the season. And so now you're starting to say like, well, at this age, is he starting to slow down? Like, is he struggling down the back half of the season because it's such a long grind to like stay productive? Because we have a 2-year sample size of this now. So there's definitely like a red flag there, but there's some teams I'd really be interested in him. Like Detroit really needs another wide receiver outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't think they would do that because of how well they've drafted. So probably not going to happen there. But other teams like I think the Colts would be like a sneaky team. Like they franchise tag Michael Pittman and they really need another wide receiver outside of that. Cause like Josh Downs showed some signs in his rookie season, but he's just a smaller slot wide receiver. And Alec Pierce was totally awful in year number 2. So like they need some more weapons there for Anthony Richardson. So I think they would be a really interesting kind of sleeper team. And then I think we already talked about the Chargers a little bit, but I think the Chargers really need to do something if they don't take a wide receiver number 5 overall, which they absolutely should, especially if Marvin Harrison Jr. still happens to be on the board. But the Chargers got to rebuild that wide receiver room. Like, I don't think that room is going to look the same 2 years from now as it does at the moment, because Keenan Allen's old. Mike Williams is getting up there and he just can't ever stay healthy. Like, they got to totally retool those pass catchers for Justin Herbert.
I think those are all very worthy options and makes sense for Stephon as well. I think you're right. This comes down to his cap, absorption, like what teams can absorb it, because that's the only way that Buffalo is going to be willing to do this is just kind of like to move on from him. Now, they don't have a real positional need, but the team that I think the team I'm about to describe, and I don't mean to do the like, after this, I'm going to tell you about whatever, because this is a podcast, so that people could just fast forward if they really wanted to. But the team I'm about to describe is in sore need of something, anything, and they have a ton of salary cap space, and you can only use so much of it relative to free agency. And even then, I don't know who the forget position. Like, I don't know who the free agent out there is that you can go get and feel really proud about yourself. Like maybe Christian Wilkins you bring in and, cool. But Stephon Diggs goes a long way. The Commanders, why not? I mean, the Commanders have literally the most salary cap space in the NFL, probably more than they can use. Right. And you've got a new head coach. You're all about this new era. If you do draft whoever it is, Drake May or Jane Daniels, I know that, again, you've got Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. So, again, not the same sort of starvation at the position the way the Chargers have, like you just mentioned, or the Colts for that matter, or even we could kind of talk ourselves into any one of these situations. Maybe the Lions is the best example, but I do think the culture question would come into play with the Lions. But the Commanders really need to make one of these power moves. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And again, I talked about with, the Giants, I don't know how you can't sense an opportunity to take over the NFC East with the situations that Dallas and Philadelphia are in.
Yeah. And the Giants would be another interesting team too, if they don't take a wide receiver number 6 overall. They have Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson have potential, but we still got to see it. You don't think either one of those guys is a number 1 wide receiver, but Washington would be interesting because Diggs can play in the slot. He can play outside. They can move him around. So it's not like he's coming in and he's totally replacing one of their other wide receivers. They can move those guys around, and their new head coach is a good play caller that we saw have success last season with the talented group of pass catchers. So I think that would be really interesting. And also for Jahan Dotson, who showed a ton of potential as a rookie and then had an awful season in year number 2, it's kind of well, we got new ownership, new coaching staff. Are we in on Jahan Dotson right now? Or do we think that year number 1 was more of an outlier than year number 2 was? So that would be really interesting. I would like to see Washington make a couple of really big splash moves, because they just sold off the roster for pieces last year.
Yeah, if it's not Stephon Diggs, I do kind of anticipate them doing something, along maybe not those lines, but I do think that a week from now, people's opinion of the Commanders has been elevated by the activity, because they have the cap space to spend and they have the desire to really kind of, be a functional NFL franchise, which hasn't been the case there in forever. Do we have anything else that we want to hit, or do we want to start to wind down and get out of
here? Yeah, I think we can probably get out of here. I just want to mention too, because you mentioned there's not a ton of free agents that I think you could feel really good about. And I feel like we all called this. It was well, the Colts are obviously going to franchise tag Michael Pittman. It felt like Tampa Bay was going to franchise Mike Evans. They didn't do that, but they worked out an extension with him to keep him around.
And now Baker's probably headed back as a result of it. Right,
the free agent class just isn't as good as we all thought it was going to be. And the Bengals franchise tag T Higgins, we knew all of those things were going to happen. So these pipe dreams of go get this guy, trade for this guy was never going to happen. Now all of a sudden Calvin Ridley, who's headed into his age 30 season, is a free agent for the first time in his NFL career. And he's going to be the top available free agent wide receiver. I do feel like somebody's going to probably overpay Calvin Ridley, even though I think he still is a positive addition to any football team for the most part. It's just this wide receiver class of free agents isn't nearly as good as anybody thought it was going to be. And that's all the more reason you should attack the position in the draft.
I agree. Okay, well, hopefully this time next week we're like, man, we didn't see this coming. Everything was chaotic and amazing and blah blah blah. We'll obviously see as we get there. Stephen, before we go, what is one non-football related thing you plan to do this weekend? It could be something you're gonna watch. Maybe you're gonna go on a hike. Maybe you're gonna go swimming. It's probably a little still too chilly for that. But whatever. Like, what is a non-football related activity that you plan on participating in this weekend?
Well, I'm still totally stuck in the Dune world, and
God.
I will probably go see Dune Part 2 again at some point this weekend. I also started rereading the first book. I'm about a third of the way through it, so I'm hoping to finish that this weekend so I can move on to book number 2 and continue my Dune obsession. Right now.
So that's where the whole "I'd rather read a book" thing comes from. That wouldn't have been a line you went to if you were in a different mode right now. But because you're down.
No, I mean I might have. I do a lot of reading, but this week I've read the Dune books before, and just because of the movie and it's like been on my mind, I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna reread the entire book.
I have not a lot of knowledge on the Dune novel series. How many books are there?
So there's a lot of them, but
dear.
it gets kind of confusing because there's 6 books written by Frank Herbert, who is the main writer, but then he died and his son, who is also a writer, kept the series going, and his son has written like 20 books, but I've never read any of those. It's all pretty regarded as like garbage and like him just keeping the franchise alive because it's a moneymaker. So I haven't read any of those. I've read the original 3 books are really only the ones you need to read because it all gets really weird by book 4, 5, and 6. But the good stuff is in the first 3 books.
I mean this respectfully. So when somebody says I've read the Dune books, what is the requirement for that to be a fair statement in your mind? The first 3 books or the first 6 books written by the original
I would
author?
say only the first 2, because that was all he was initially going to do. He wrote the first one, didn't agree with the response that it got because he felt like people misunderstood it. So then he wrote the second one as a response to the reaction of the first book, and then just kept writing books, and it just gets really weird. And he was on a lot of like hallucinogenic drugs at the time.
Wow, I don't think we've ever used that phrase on the NFL show, unless not a show that I've been on. But okay, I will make you this this promise. I will look into getting the first Dune book. How long are we talking here? Is this a big read?
It's like 550 pages. Like
it's like a Harry Potter level.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a solid book. It's sizable. Book 2 is much shorter, but book 1 is really all you need to read to be caught up in the pop culture world right now.
I promise to give it an assessment and think about it. We might make a Barnes and Noble trip this weekend, and we'll see. There's a Barnes and Noble next to it. Yeah, it's next to a Nothing Bundt Cakes. You ever had one of those?
No.
There's no free ads here. We've given a lot of publicity to a lot of things. Nothing Bundt Cakes, they rock. Give them a chance if you haven't yet. Okay, Stephen. As we leave, please offer us your best audio impression of a sandworm from Dude.